Welcome to the Lost Signals Discusses Film and TV. Using the revolutionary Manzur-Ramosi-Thurlow scale,
or MONS,
we scrupulously review these art forms with an emphasis on narrative structure. Join us for another entertaining episode. Hello and welcome back to the Lost Signals Discusses Film and Television. Tonight we're going to be discussing a new Netflix movie, Andy Samberg.
No, it's on Hulu, I think.
If you will. What's that?
It's on Hulu, I believe, and not Netflix.
I'm sorry. Yes, you're right. Oh, whew, my God. Hulu, not Netflix. Don't try to watch it on Netflix. You won't find it there. Andy Samberg movie called Palm Springs. It's been getting a lot of critical applause, and you're about to hear what we think of it now. So I'm going to be your host, Steve Ramosi, joined tonight by Christopher Morgan.
Good evening.
Scott Thurlow.
Yesterday, tomorrow, today, it doesn't matter.
And Jonathan Ian Manzer.
stuck in an infinite loop of podcasts.
That's right. All right, so... I didn't... You know what? We haven't discussed a funny logline, so if anybody has one now, say it in the next 3 seconds. Otherwise, I'm going to go to the plot.
Sequel to Groundhog's Day?
Yeah.
Andy Samberg and Groundhog Day.
That's
obviously.
pretty good. I mean, that's pretty accurate, I suppose. The obvious one. All right, so I'm going to start off with the plot, and we'll go from there. So this movie is, as was just mentioned, kind of a newer age Groundhog's Day, and I feel like there have been a string of movies in a similar vein lately. Many of which I've heard been pretty good. I haven't seen a lot of them, but like Happy Death Day, I think was one of them. And
I did see that, and I thought it was actually solid enough.
Yeah, there have been a bunch of them lately, and I've heard pretty good things about several, more than one of them, I suppose.
Yeah.
But basically what happens in this is you come upon Andy Samberg. He's already entrenched in Groundhog's Day for God knows how long. He uses his knowledge of what's going to happen in that day to seduce someone. Sarah is the character's name, played by Kristen Milioti. And in the midst of that, his arch nemesis, who you learn much more about later, decides to shoot him with an arrow in the midst of the seduction. So he crawls away into the cave, which allows him to restart the day. However, as it turns out, if you have not been entrenched in this eternal, Groundhog's Day, then if you go into that cave, that brings you into it. And Sarah follows our main character, Niles, or both of them, I guess, are main characters. But Sarah follows Niles, Andy Samberg's character, into the cave and starts her own Groundhog's Day. They have a fairly short in the estimation of the film, but perhaps years or like who knows how long it is, kind of courtship, and at which time
friendship fling.
Yeah, at which time they get together, and then it kind of starts her thinking about how she wants to get out, and she tries to figure out how to get the hell out of this thing, which all comes together in a fairly formulaic but well done rom-com ending where they both where she figures out how to get out and brings him with her. And, throughout there are very interesting conversations and things like that, especially with Roy, who is another character played by J.K. Simmons, who is the aforementioned nemesis of Andy Samberg's character. And there's a lot of interesting things that go on like between the notes of the plot here, which I think is what makes this movie good. I'm probably leaning on a very strong 2. I might give it. I could be convinced to give it a 3 for sure, but as far as like I've seen this movie 3 times at this point.
Wow, really? Okay.
Just
That you
because,
know of.
that I know of. But
That
like
you
I saw
remember.
it, twice. I saw it the first time, and I was like, "Oh, that's pretty good." So I convinced my roommates to watch it, but of course I had to watch with them. And then I convinced you guys to watch it for the podcast, so I had to watch it again. So I'm on 3 times. So I'm feeling like I'm almost in my own Palm Springs at the moment. But after 3 watches, it still holds up. It's still pretty good. It's not like the most intricate of plots, especially for like a time, or not a time travel, but like a time
Groundhog Day loop.
fucking up time movie.
It's its own thing.
And yeah, like a time loop movie, but like it's a very strong plot. I think it's a pretty strong plot, and I think I could be convinced of a 3, but going into this, I was thinking about it too.
I'm not going to convince you for 3. I thought you might if we were like doing a different order, but I'm pretty much there with you on a very strong, solid 2. I think it does hold up quite a bit. It works for what it is. It's maybe a little bit clever, maybe it assumes some knowledge of you, of the audience, on the audience's part, of like having seen specifically Groundhog Day and knowing like a bit of like what that entails. With throwing in, like a new. If you didn't mention Steve-O, they're at a wedding. So Andy Samberg lives through the day of the wedding, and Sarah is the maid of honor whose sister is getting married. So yeah, he knows all the guests and like what's going to happen, of course, at all times, and like the surrounding area. But yeah, for what it is, plot wise and narratively, I think a 2 is a deserving score. I mean, again, if you guys, Chris or E, have an argument for a 3, I don't think you will or do, but I think 2 it earns its 2. It rightly so. So.
Well, I think it was incredibly smart of them to both have Andy Samberg's character Niles as having been in there for a long time, and Sarah as the audience surrogate because it allows us to move past the initial wonder of being stuck in this, because you have Niles. Sarah goes through all of the how do I get out of it, but he's
fully nihilist at that point.
He's been entrenched in it so long.
I've already been. I also feel that the writer of this looked at the Reddit thread for all of the ways you can escape from Groundhog's Day and decided in the first half hour to cover every single one of them. But it really establishes not only the rules of the time loop, but kind of a bigger exploration of what happens within time loop. Again, we don't have to set it up like in previous films. We can just dive right into a kind of an established narrative.
Yeah.
And I thought all of that was very interesting. The reason I'm giving it a 2 is because the rom-com angle of it was good, but it wasn't. It's a rom-com with a time loop framework, but in itself, it's an okay rom-com.
As kind of Groundhog's Day was itself, right? Like
I would probably give that a 2 as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
I was going to say Groundhog had the advantage of the novelty of being the first to do it.
Yeah. But this has the advantage of assuming that you know the rules.
I agree with you, Ian. I really like the fact that whoever wrote this film, I think that's such a great comment, went through the Reddit thread of Groundhog's Day, because they did. And the thing I liked about this explanation, because the problem with you have these time dilation movies, and you've seen it a lot, like the more scientific things, like Stargate or Star Trek, will find some time thing where you're in a bubble and all the rest of the time is happening about you. So when this thing ends, it could be like 12 days, 15 days. And then you have something like Groundhog Day where you're like, well, is the rest of the world going through this? The thing I liked about the multiverse thing is it's like, no, we're in this space-time bubble. So, yeah.
They did flesh that out. Yep.
So basically, they can go through 2 years, and the time, conceivably, it would take us to, less time that would take us to record this podcast. I did like that angle. I really did. Because like I said, this is a trope. I've seen it, on Supernatural. They had the thing. It was divinity that caused it. So I really liked the fact that they used the multiverse thing and pulled you out of it. and I was telling them before that I wish this film had a little more of an edge, and I couldn't figure it out. And I think Ian's right. I think the rom-com aspect should have kind of just been there, but not. I was much more interested in it when I was not focused on the will they, won't they aspect of it. So I'm going to give it a 2 too. I was actually kind of hoping, going into the movie not knowing anything about it, I was kind of hoping it was going to be like these two and Roy terrorizing her sister's wedding. I was kind of like half expecting that to be the plot of the film.
I will say, and the reason that I say a very strong 2, I'm probably going to stick with that, but what I really like about this movie is like the moment that it gets like threatens to get like sappy, right? Like when they actually finally sleep together and like they're trying to figure out their thing, she fucking literally runs a car into Roy and fucking puts him in the hospital, and that's what changes his mind. Like the fact that she is going through this whole thing and puts it onto Niles and Andy Samberg's whole thing. She's like, I did you a favor. I got this guy off your back, which she actually did. Like she made him think about what he's been doing to Niles the whole time. I thought that aspect of it was really cool. Like kind of like throwing all three of their kind of philosophies on top of each other and like seeing what comes out of it, like was kind of interesting. But yeah, I think I'm going to leave it as strong 2. And it sounds like everybody else is as well, right?
Yep.
Okay. So Scott, why don't you tell us about themes?
Yeah, I mean, so you sort of just briefly introed it. Like, I think that aspect goes more into themes, in fact, where, so when clearly Niles, Andy Samberg's character, has been doing this again for untold iterations of it, right? So I guess this is the one, and like, that I thought was clever, just as a quick thing, that the opening, like 20 minutes, you realize quickly enough as the audience, like, oh, he's been going through it, so he knows what's up. Yeah. So I guess this time he just had to try to sleep with Sarah, even though he's technically said he's done that thousands of times or however many times. So
he only says that later.
Right, he only reveals that to her later, so you don't know that either, of course.
Well, on the first date, you don't tell someone that you've
right,
slept with 1,000 times.
Well, that's the thing. Like, he feels so bad about, like, not telling her the truth, but, like, you almost can't at that point in where you're at.
Yeah,
like,
that's
right?
where, like, the rom-com angle comes in. But it is, like, I'm going to steal a little bit from Ian, but I'll let him expand upon it in a sec. It's that when they start having conversations, when he pulls her into the loop, and he tries to tell her what's happening, or she's like forcing him. She confronts him about like, "What'd you do to me?" Right? He's like, "Listen, doesn't matter. Like, just live in the moment, because that's literally all you can do. This is the only day you have, so do whatever you want. You can try to, I've done so many suicides. Like, there was a dialogue, going back to original Groundhog Day. He was like, "Yeah, I've tried anything I could think of to get out of it, and haven't. So fuck it." Right? That's essentially his attitude and mindset / philosophy towards it. And she's sort of like, because she's more like, of course, like getting thrown like naive about it, but then because she is who she is, she decides, no, fuck that. I'm gonna try to figure out, like, learn as much as I can and break out. Meanwhile, Roy, who again, like, it is a funny moment to me. Like, the funny aspect is that, oh yeah, the reason Roy's hunting me is we partied in one iteration. I partied hardcore with him, and he said it was the best day of his life. So I said, here you go, essentially, and he hates me now for it. Right?
He ended up finding the best day of his life.
Yeah,
though.
and then like that creates that tension, as you said, and then when Niles and Sarah start becoming like actual, like, opening up to each other and like sort of psychologically liking each other, not just like randomly physically doing it, and then she paralyzes Roy essentially, which makes him realize what he's been doing to Niles the whole time. So it's like this nice little like triangle tension in a sense. And yeah, it's like, it's sort of, each of them has their own philosophy that sort of balances it out in a sense. Like, and as they learn more, at least Sarah begins to learn more, she figures out a way to indeed break it. And that sort of triggers Niles to realize that he doesn't want her to leave, because they've become like love. He's like, I love you.
Yeah.
Being given the fact that we're living this time loop. So I think it all works really quite well. And yeah, it's balanced kind of nicely on like sort of your traditional standard rom-com-ish kind of stuff that we mentioned. So I'm looking at a pretty strong one for themes, a solid one at least. And I think the movie the script and so forth does a good job of giving each of these characters their viewpoint, which then sort of switches and fluctuates as it goes on and as they figure out more about like their situation. So
yeah, I certainly think that they do kind of each find the best day of their life throughout. I have an issue with the post-credit sequence, which I will talk about later, but I think it really is fascinating. Like, everybody trying to figure out like what they're searching for, and like the Roy character, J.K. Simmons, like finally after getting crushed to death and spending a day like dying in the ICU, learning that his family really is pretty great and like pretty beautiful, and like spending his days there. When Andy Samberg goes and like tries to find him drunkenly because he's like distraught about Sarah leaving him, he goes and finds him and he says like, yeah, I spent a lot of time like fucked up and like trying to inflict pain upon you, and I didn't really realize what I was doing until it happened to me. And like I think that's really fascinating. There's the Niles being a fucking nihilist coming into this angle, which is really great. Like as you said, like it is great that they come in like in media res almost, or definitely, but like the important thing is I think that like he has had the time to become a nihilist, whereas Sarah has not. So like eventually she would have theoretically, however. And Scott, you said something. You said like because of who she is, she decides to break out of it. But I don't think it's because of who she is. I think it's because of the circumstances that she has to wake up to every day.
I would say, yeah.
She finds herself in a circumstance that just eats at her and kills her every morning, right? Which you find out about later in the day, that she slept with her sister's fiance the day before their wedding. And then she has to wake up in that every single day. And like that is really what drives her to get out. And like Andy Samberg's character, Niles, doesn't have that. Like he's got like his own sadness, but it's not like, it doesn't like really come to that depth. He kind of has come to terms with the fact that his girlfriend's cheating on him, and he can go and like do other things about it, but she can never like forget the fact that she wakes up every single day.
The hell is other people
in the wrong bedroom, Yeah, exactly. And it is like this fucking almost no exit type of situation, right? And like, but like without them being each other's hell, like other people are actually their hell, like, which is an interesting thing. Like outside, the people outside of those three are their actual hell.
Well, oddly enough, though, Roy did play that role for a very long time.
He did.
And thus, pain and death give us meaning in life. When you realize that, like, again, it's the closest that he can come to actually dying is when he realizes his happiness in life. I don't know. It's I actually think the movie is much better than it. It's much smarter than it deserves to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of these kind of themes that they're bringing up are intended by the director. It's just they aren't emergent from, like, he's actually exploring kind of a deeper aspect of what it would be like to be eternal in one day.
And the writer, I need to give credit where credit is due. The director is Max Barbakoff, and the writer is Andy Sierra. And I just wanted to mention the two of them because I think this is a smarter movie than it almost deserves to be, right? Like for what it's for the genre that it's trying to be in.
Yeah, it seems like a backhand compliment, but I think it at the end of the day earns its praise in a sense.
Absolutely.
I'm going to give it a 1, but I'm also going to go back because there was something I didn't get to talk about when we were talking about the narrative, because you didn't want to talk about the mid-credit scene, and I do want to talk about the ending. And it does kind of tie into the themes, because one thing I was wondering about how it was going to end, was it going to be a bow tie ending or was it going to be an indeterminate ending? And the mid-credit scene, I think instead of having the explosion happen and them ending up in the pool and then showing mid-credit that J.K. Simmons went and you know what I was about to say.
I got you.
Sorry.
Then he goes to Andy Samberg is just like, your girlfriend sent me some crazy stuff, and he's like, do I know you? I think it would have been much better if they saw the explosion and then cut to that instead of having it in the mid-credit scene, because I mean, we're talking about what I was saying Ian before is I wish the film had an edge, and I don't really think this film deserves an indeterminate ending, but I do think it really deserves. I don't think it deserves a bow tie ending either, and I kind of like. That's the aspects of the film I like, and the aspects where the themes where I thought it hit is because they think of things that again, probably reading Reddit, they thought of things that you as the audience would think about. It's just like, well, what about J.K. Simmons? How are they going to get it to? So I'm going to give it a strong one, but I really wanted to say that I felt that as strong as like the themes were and the parts of the movie that really worked, I thought they really that would have been a perfect ending is if they cut the pool part out.
So I just have one quick question. Since you brought up the end sequence, I want to bring up the opening sequence quickly. So he was in the middle of millions of attempts at this, decided to have sex that he knew he was going to get interrupted.
Yes.
No. That part is fine because J.K. Simmons is also outside of the time loop, so he can show up whenever.
No, in the first one, he with his girlfriend, with his actual girlfriend at the beginning of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
He had sex with her, knowing that she's going to interrupt.
It depends on what he does, right? Like maybe they finished the first time. Maybe he finished a lot faster.
Right.
But you mentioned it, so I guess I'll talk about it now, Chris. Here's my biggest problem with the logic of this. Andy Samberg should never be in that last scene with J.K. Simmons where he's like, oh, now I realize that this is real, because the entire point of how Sarah figured things out was she blew the goat up and then it wasn't there anymore. So if something that gets blown up isn't there anymore, it shouldn't be there, right? So Andy Samberg should not be at the wedding at that point, right?
I mean, unless she blows it up after the wedding.
But what I was also going to say was, didn't she say something like, you blew the
I guess she does blow it up after the wedding.
Well, she
But
does.
it could be at it, you know what I mean? Like, we can nitpick it there. Like, I get what you mean, but sure.
But it's also kind of like it's a bubble outside of time, but also it's just like the goat. I don't know. I thought there was some line where he was like, and you never saw the goat again, and there was some lingering thing like, well, I didn't.
She says, I tell you exactly what it is. She runs the experiment on the goat, and then she comes back and she's telling Andy Samberg, she's telling Niles about it, and she says the goat wasn't there the next day, so that means it worked.
Yes, you're right. That's exactly that's what it was. Yes.
So that being said, if they blew themselves up, then they shouldn't be there. But you're right, Scott. If they blew themselves up after the wedding, maybe perhaps the ghost of him is still there, like his original person is still there.
That's all I'm saying to you. At least if we're going to argue about that stuff.
That's fine. I'll give it that. That's fine. But themes all ones all around, right?
Yes.
All right, Ian, talk about antagonists.
Well, one could say Roy, but I'm not going to. It's actually very fittingly for a time movie that Sarah and Niles are both stuck in different times of their lives. Sarah is very much influenced by the past. She's stuck in past traumas and distrust that's built from it. And Niles, both literally and also mentally, is stuck in the present, but neither can see a future. And that's actually what they have to overcome to succeed in breaking their loop. Sarah has to learn to trust and learn to, in a sense, accept responsibility for herself, which is really nice that she didn't have to go to Niles for it. She figured it all out on her own. But she left all of that kind of her parents and the old pressure she had on herself, and Niles had to regress that. And really his changes came is, I looked at the future and I didn't want you not to be in it. And it's him moving out of his kind of stuck in that, in the present, and actually seeing a future for once. And they decide to go in the future together. And isn't that what love is about? I don't know. But I think that is a fitting antagonist.
But it was for them. Yeah, I mean, I think it's well said. I don't really have much more to add. I think it is effective, and I think that is a true antagonist. And even, like, when Roy was, like, it's kind of a good slow roll because he shows up again the first, 20 minutes, the first night, right? And then she's like, what the hell was that? He's like, oh yeah, by the way, I did it to him too, and now he hates me. And then like you said, Steve-O, even he has his own revelation because of Sarah. So again, like that triangle thing, as I mentioned, I think comes into play here to this question. And yeah, I think it works quite well, and the script is smartly handles it, and their characters reflect it. So
yeah, it's interesting. Like your explanation there, Ian, while very on point, is almost bordering on the theme itself, like the themes itself. But yeah, I don't think that I can see Roy as an antagonist. Roy is almost a foil to Niles, but like not in an antagonistic way. Post, his own trauma, right? Like, so he has his own trauma, and then he realizes that he has been causing trauma to Niles his entire time. It's so interesting to see like the Andy Samberg style on this like completely nihilistic character, because like he's like this happy-go-lucky
goofy,
kind of like
frat boy, kind of pretty much.
Yeah, like making cracks about like
Nihilism doesn't have to be depressing.
No. That's what I'm saying. But that's what I'm saying. It's a great take on that, because like it doesn't have to be like everything is bullshit type of. I mean, it kind of does have to be that, but like you can play it in several different ways, and I think that the way that he plays in this is great. Like honestly, I've been saying this for years, and I gotta stop expecting Andy Samberg projects to be bad, because every time I say like that looks like shit, it turns out to be a fucking good movie or TV show, as Brooklyn Nine-Nine goes. But
sure.
like,
but the minute you say this looks good,
he'll turn into fucking Adam Sandler.
So keep assuming that, and then
but like,
film.
not that I dislike all of Andy, whatever. Regardless, I think that the antagonist is certainly partially themselves, right? Like they're definitely like stopping themselves from moving into the next moment. And I think that every character in this feels like very antagonized throughout most of the movie, to be honest. Like they all feel like they are trying to figure out a puzzle that they cannot figure out, and it causes them to create pain for the other characters in the movie until they actually like get to the end, and they kind of figure their shit out. But like
when they move on from the temporal,
when they move on from the shit that's holding them back in their own internal lives, right? Like, and I think that's a great antagonist. So I'm gonna give it a 1.
Yep.
1.
All right. 1's all around. Chris, tell us about protagonist.
Well, it's funny because on the one hand, it's Andy Samberg, but on the other hand, without Sarah, we would have no explanation as to what was going on. So I'm going to give them, I'm going to say side by side, they're joint protagonists. But funny enough, I'm finding Sarah, like, I'm considering them both protagonists, but I'm going to give Sarah just a slight edge because she had to learn the system. I mean, she told the system. She was the gateway into the exposition.
Yep.
She had the most character growth, and without her, nobody would have gotten out. And nobody, J.K. Simmons' character would not have developed were it not for her actions. Obviously, because of her relationship with Niles, it pulled him out. So yeah, I'm going to give them joint protagonist things, but I'm going to give her a little bit more. I'm going to say it's more like a 55-45 or a 60-40.
Yep. Nope. I like that quite a bit. I certainly agree. And like the thing is, even like if you just briefly remove the time loop thing, it's a rom-com. So I mean, the two leads, romantic leads, like have to share protagonist duty, I would say. But on top of that, as we just said, the script is very clever and good about giving them each their own very distinct personalities and working together and sometimes against each other even. So yeah, I like the 45-55 thing, Chris. I pretty much followed up on that, and I'm going to give it a 1 because of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the way I was coming into this was like, yeah, it's a rom-com, it's a dual protagonist movie. I am actually going to give them 50-50 for this specific reason. Sarah disappears from the story for a while. And you're right, like it is a lot of her instigation that creates well, it's definitely her that gets them out, and it's her that like makes him confront a lot of things. But he also makes her confront a lot of things in her life. And she is gone from the movie for about 25 minutes when he's like fawning over her.
She's studying quantum physics.
She
So
is,
no
which you
one
find
wants
out
to
about.
watch that.
Which you find out about later, but like
it cuts to a quick montage of explaining why she was gone. Sure.
But which is fine, but like I still see them both as like kind of equal partners as the protagonists in this. I see her as the I don't know what the word is. Like she's the instigating factor in a lot of things that happen in this movie, which is a reason that I like it probably more than a lot of rom-coms, is because she has a ton of agency. She really, really, really embodies like, I want to get the fuck out of here, and I'm going to figure out a way to do it. And if you want to come with me, cool. And he's like, has to figure out that he does, right? Like he's the one that has to get like pulled out of the depths, right? In this
that's
movie,
why 45-55 split, buddy.
which is great. But it is a movie. I mean, you know, like it's interesting. Like, you know, it starts on him. It's goes through that whole period where it's just about his like sadness, right? Like he's the sad person who has lost somebody, and like
The classic like late stage third act rom-com like arc.
Exactly. So I don't know. It's interesting. I think they're both very important. I do like the kind of they do a little bit of like not an entire switch on like the gender roles in normal rom-coms, but they do something where it's like both of these characters are important, and she is actually the one with more agency, I think, than him, which I really love about this. And so I'm going to give protagonist a 1 for both of them. I think they both do a great job.
Yeah, right on.
They're both very charming.
And they have good chemistry, we'll say.
And they have great chemistry.
Yeah, they play each other up against each other quite well. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. All right. So that's ones for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Let's move on to supporting characters with me. And you know, the first one that jumps out in your mind is going to be Roy for sure. And he's great. Like J.K. Simmons plays great murderous psychopath for a little while, and then like somebody who evaluates his life later on, and like he's great at that part too. Like J.K. Simmons is always going to be good. And you know, I could go down this whole list. I don't know. Do you guys have like favorites that you want to point out?
I mean,
like Tull and Abe are fine.
I like Darla.
Darla is pretty great.
She's good.
Yeah. The supporting characters other than Roy are fine, but they're not really the point of this movie, I don't think.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. Like, they're there, and like they do a good job.
Legitimately, they're static by necessity.
Exactly. They literally can't have more. I mean, other than Roy, they literally can't have more dimensions than what they have because they're stuck in one day, right?
Yeah, because they're not part of the time.
Of reoccurring cast members that pop up here and there, and the world seems fleshed out to me.
No.
And then the dinosaurs. So
The dinosaurs.
They even exist. But no, I mean, like, it's tough because, like, yes, by design and nature of the story itself, like, they're going to be like statically in the background almost because they're not like in on the the mystery, if you will, like the truth, the reality of what's happening, or maybe they are, but it's a different reality.
Groundhog's Day, which I think is a very fair comparison maker, had a tremendous supporting cast to it. This has Roy.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, right. Like I'm saying, like they flesh out the world, like the wedding guests and so forth. Sorry, Chris, real quick. Like who are the Tala and Abe and even Andy Samberg's girlfriend? They're okay. They're there, but go ahead.
I was going to say, walking into this, I was going to give it a 0, but I'm thinking this. It's fun to have characters you like and remember, but do they serve a purpose? And Roy serves a purpose. But in a lot of ways, the other characters serve a greater purpose than Roy because Roy is one of the ones who's caught into it. So it's just like we learn about Sarah and a lot of her motivations, and what the secret she's holding is that she slept with her soon-to-be brother-in-law the night before the wedding. There's elements of everybody's life at that party. And like I said, Roy just happened to have gotten caught in the whirlpool, and his character was yet another way to see aspects of the world and to explore different things. But he was kind of like, without him, Sarah wouldn't have grown. So what I'm saying is, they're not all like. What I'm saying is, all these characters and all these bit parts actually do help form the tapestry that kind of informs our protagonists. So if they had no purpose at all, I'd be like, yeah, they're fun in a zero. But after talking about the protagonists and the antagonists and the themes and everything, I'm like, no, all those party people had a purpose in motivating our main characters. So I'm going to give them 1.
Oh man, 24-hour party people should have been my fucking log line. Damn it. Anyways, no, I think it's a good point. I think you might have convinced me. Like, I could have gone either way, really, but I think the tapestry thing, angle, the fact that they sort of do create, like, come together to create something that's greater than just them being there, and like, in some way, at least, sort of resonate against the our protagonists. So yeah, I think it's enough for a solidish 1 for me at the end of the day.
Yeah, I was gonna give it a 1 for Roy, regardless, but that's a very solid argument, Chris, and I'm giving it an even stronger 1 for that. So
Yeah, sure.
Well done.
all right, that's 1s all around. Let's move on to dialogue, Scotty.
All right, so I'd say about 85% of it or so worked quite a bit. I mean, it's Andy Samberg, as we mentioned numerous times now, so him delivering his sort of like Andy Samberg-ish, like, you know, like acting, and like even the exchanges, like the interplays between, especially him and Sarah, of course, and like even when he's like flirting with other people or like doing whatever, like fucking around with other characters like Darla and stuff like that, right? So like, I think for the most part, I found myself laughing quite a bit at the movie when it wanted me to, you know what I mean, like not at it, you know, because it was bad. So I think, and even yeah, exactly, and even like the serious stuff like also worked, like when they try to figure out, like, you know, again, the philosophical and like where they are mentally and their viewpoints are. So yeah, for the most part, by and large, I think the dialogue landed, the jokes landed, and the actual conversations landed as well. So I really don't have many faults. Like, sure, not everything did, but like I said, for a large majority of it, it did work, and I think it deserves a solid 1.
More so, I think that the body language between Sarah and Nigel, especially Sarah, or what I said, Nigel, yeah, whatever.
You and names.
Yeah, especially Sarah at moments, they sold their parts very well. When she realizes she might be falling in love, and the look in her eyes told me everything I need to know. She didn't have to say a word of dialogue. I have to give them credit here for that.
Yeah, I think that the dialogue, as you said, Scott, well, I'll say this. Never cringeworthy throughout the entire movie, and for most of it... All right, you let me know what was cringeworthy in a minute.
No. The opening, when he went up to give the speech, I started getting very uncomfortable, and then they won me back.
And then they got you back?
Yeah, but I was preparing myself for a terrible cringe.
Right, well, that was the entire idea. It was like you have to give the specific speech that will get her to like want you, and like, well, like, yeah, I think that all that was done well, and like, you're right. It was like, I saw that and I was like, oh, this could be really bad, but then you kind of realize that he's done this 1,000 times before, and he knows exactly how to save it, or like whatever.
It's the perfect subversion.
He knows how to like walk the fucking tightrope of it. And I think the movie does that pretty well, actually, like even on that scene. And yeah, I think that I never felt it was like cringeworthy, and I never, and for most of it, I thought it was pretty good. It's not like Oscar-worthy screenwriting by any means, I don't think, but like again, it is just solid dialogue almost the entire way through, and I have to give it full credit for that. So I'm gonna give it a 1.
Yep.
Chris is nodding his head, so I'm assuming he's gonna say the same.
I said
we have audio-only listeners, Chris.
Yes, I give it a 1, and good point with the nonverbal Ian.
All right. Oh, that was Chris's nod to the nonverbal.
Very meta of you.
Ian, tell us about style.
Okay. It's good. I know you love the soundtrack, Chris. You were talking about it. However, I think it is generic. This type of movie. I don't think that elevates it out of being something that's different than like a Garden State or a Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Like this is taking elements from other movies like this and just played it straight. And not saying it's bad. I'm just saying, actually, I am saying that it's one of the better better rom-coms, but because it's an elevated movie on that thing, I have to judge it with a little bit more harshness. And I don't think there's anything that really stands out style-wise. So I might give it, yes, Chris.
No. I mean, no. I want you to finish your thought because I want to follow up with what you're saying.
Oh, please. I was basically done with it. So go on.
Because I agree with you, and when I talked to the guys before Steve-O got there after I watched the movie, I said there's 4 songs that I love that I really appreciated them having. Was August 10th by Crumbin. While she's doing the metaphysics montage, they're doing this one of the songs from Genesis that I love. It's called The Brazilian. I loved that. He has a revelation. They use a Leonard Cohen song called The Partisan, and when they go into the cave together and get blown up, they're listening. Kate Bush Cloud Bursting is playing, and I thought what was going on at the times. I thought all 3 parts are really good, and thank you for using The Partisan and not using Hallelujah for when he has the revelations. Even Cohen said enough with it. But the thing is, the reason those things stand out, besides the fact that I love all 4 of those songs, is because without that, it would have just been, it goes a lot to show you how much music can add to a film. And were it something, were that more consistent, I would have gotten, I mean, I hadn't thought of The Brazilian for years. And I'm like, this song came up, I'm like, oh my God, I got chills. But it was the ability to blend the right song at the right time. But it was 4 parts that I loved is what pulled me out of what I agree with Ian 100%. Like, it was good, but it wasn't really.
Also, these type of movies, you kind of expect a good soundtrack with.
You hope.
You hope, but like that's the thing is, I don't think a good soundtrack necessarily makes elevates this style of movie above any other. Because I think my expectation, seeing a movie, kind of a quirky romance movie, is that's going to have a good road soundtrack to it.
Yeah, but after you started talking, I'm like, yes, that's why those 4 songs struck out. Exactly. I was just trying to back up your argument.
Thank you.
What do you think, Steve-O?
There was there was nothing about the cinematography that was, I don't mean this to be a pun with the earthquake, but groundbreaking. But I thought that the take on the Groundhogs on the time loop story was interesting. I liked kind of that the take on the genre, I guess we'll say. And I know that that's kind of something that we've discussed in style before, so I kind of wanted to address that. I do love the soundtrack to this. I thought that the soundtrack elevated it, and the cinematography kind of was fine, made it a movie. There were no, I'll say this, there were no shots that left me fucking drooling or anything like that.
Well,
but
may I ask you a question quickly then?
Sure.
Since you said that genre, I think the genre of this is rom-com. How do you rate this with other romantic comedies.
I think this is elevated over most other romantic comedies I've seen just by dint of its philosophical aspects, of its kind of existential discussions that it has. I actually really love that part of it. And there have been other rom-coms that have tried to do this to much lesser extents, for sure. And I think that it does very good in that. And granted, there are some other, like we talked about. I think the original Groundhog's Day is a rom-com, right? Like that has, and that's a great movie too. But I like where this picked up from, where like almost by the same way, in the same way that it like comes in media res, like this picks up where Groundhog's Day left off and like runs with that style and tries to do something new with it. And I think it does a pretty good job. So I'm going to leave off with style as a 1, probably a softer 1, because I don't think that the like I said, the cinematography is like anything mind-blowing, but I think that there's enough there that it deserves a stylistic in terms of the genre. And as you mentioned, Chris, I really like the music in this. I think that it goes well with, I think that where they lacked a little bit style-wise in terms of the shots that they had some really great like emotional or like emotive music that like really made you understand what that scene was trying to tell you.
Highlighted the scene.
And and so I'm going to give it a 1. It's a softer 1. I don't begrudge you guys for a 0 at all. I'm not going to try and convince you to give it a 1, but I'm going to give it a 1 for this.
This one's super tough for me. It's the one I was most on the fence about, and you guys all made good points because, I've been trying to like parse it out, think it out as you guys talked it out. That yes, there's nothing mind blowing about the style, but it works for what it is, especially as we agree within its genre. Your point about the soundtrack, like I thought it was good, but I didn't recognize the songs, or I thought they played a song that I recognized, but it wasn't the one I thought it was. Even though I thought it still worked for the given scene that I'm thinking of. So, like, I don't know, man. Like, I might just, like, take a page from E's book and say I'm judging it a bit more against everything, against the field. And, again, not that it was bad or shitty or didn't make sense in any way. It's just that it was maybe the weakest part of this film to me. So I might end up giving a softer 0, but with no, like, major complaints. Again, there was nothing, like, totally wrong with it or, this shot made no sense or it looked terrible or whatever. But like just by dint of that, I think is the way I'm going to view the angle and just give it just knock a small point off, but still a soft 0 at the end of the day.
Fair enough. You guys sticking with 0s?
Yes.
But I can see the one. I could have gone either way, but officially I will enter it as such.
Still a 0 for you, Chris? Yes. All right. Okay. Let's go on to recommendation, Chris.
This is a tough one because I enjoyed the film. As Ian said, it shouldn't be as smart as it is, and part of me wishes it was a little less rom-com and more, because the parts I thought really hit was the farther away they got from the rom-com. You could still have that element in it without having all the other little things. So it's not something I would go out and tell everybody like, oh my God, I just saw this film, you have to see it. But if somebody said, what do you think of Palm Springs? I'd be like, yeah, it's a nice film if you have time to watch it. So I'm throwing it to, so I'm like, well, this would be a 0.5 for me probably, but I'll probably go ahead and give it a 1, because it was a pleasant film. And if somebody says, is there anything nice and light to watch? I would say like, check out Palm Springs.
I actually think this has a very wide appeal. I actually think it's almost kind of for both members of a couple.
It's a good date
great movie. Yeah, it's a great date movie because you get the romantic aspect. Sure. But if you're more into science fiction and all that, you get. And if you like the original Groundhog's Day, which a lot of people do, I would recommend this.
Still classic.
Like if you want your modern day update of it, without doing a disservice to the original.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna recommend it. I'm gonna give it a 1. It's an hour and a half long, Chris. So like, it's really not that big of a commitment. It's kind of light-ish and breezy-ish, but without being bereft, as we said, of, themes and elements. And more philosophical bents you can take from it. And yeah, I probably, you know what, I'd see it maybe one more time, and like that's become a personal measuring stick for me. Would I see it again? Yeah, I'd see it. Like I said, probably another time. And if anyone asks, like you said, Chris, oh hey, I heard of Palm Springs. Should I check it out? I'd be like, yeah, I think you'd like it. So.
To be honest with you, I'm like thinking maybe I'd recommend it to Beth. So yeah, it's definitely good.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. Like I was thinking about this question. I was like, who wouldn't I recommend this movie to? And there's almost nobody that I wouldn't recommend it to. Like, you want a recommendation for a date movie? Good movie. You want a recommendation for just like a kind of funny movie that you could just watch like without having to think about it too much? You know, like it's a good movie. If you want to fucking think deeply about something and like all the shit that happens in it, you can definitely do that with this movie if you want to. If you want to really get into the nuts and bolts of it, like this movie has a little something for everybody. It's a nice and breezy movie, but like it also has that like deeper element to it,
for sure.
Where it's like, like try and look at like what the quantum fucking physics of this like are. Which like happens like 3/4 of the way through the movie, you know, like, and there's discussions about that, and like, you know, who the hell knows what the actual science of it is, and like I would like to, but I'm sure somebody has looked into it and like written a whole thing about it. And it's only like 3 weeks old, right? Like, I guarantee we could go on Google right now and somebody has something that says like, sure. Here's what the actual quantum physics of Palm Springs is. Like, you know, there's a little something for everybody in this movie. And anybody can enjoy it, I think. So it's one of them. It's a stronger recommend, because like I don't think that there's anybody that's really gonna be like, oh, this movie fucking sucked, you know? Like,
what's interesting, we've been watching a lot of critical darlings and audience hated movies. This actually is both a critical darling and loved by audiences.
Absolutely.
So yeah, and I think that it reflects very well in it appeals to a lot, but doesn't alienate. Like, it's weird. It's surprising that it actually hits so many different groups with it.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive in that regard.
And yeah.
So I think that's going to do it, unless anybody else has anything else.
Now, what do we got? What's the numbers?
We gave this. I gave the highest score with a 9, and Scott, Ian, and Chris all gave it 8s, which is going to leave us with an 8.25, I believe. Sure. And yeah, I think that's a pretty good score for this movie.
Pretty strong, and yeah, I think it earned it for everything you said.
Yeah, we're gonna call it a night with saying goodbye from Palm Springs. I've been your host, Stephen Ramosi, joined tonight by Christopher Morgan.
Pete and repeat, we're sitting on a fence. Pete fell off, and who is left?
Nobody knows. Scott Thurlow.
And I'm going to go chill in the pool with beers infinitely after this. Good night.
And Jonathan E. Menzer.
Millions of more podcasts. An infinite more podcasts.
Happy millionth podcast, dipshit.
Thanks for joining us. See you next time.
Editing and engineering by Stephen Ramosi. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.
Or Mott's?